A few years ago, I was involved in a major infrastructure project here in Central California. I had a small role. We'll talk about what that was. The project went sideways in construction, and it didn't go a little bit sideways. It went really sideways, and it was a big deal. And the root cause of the problem was some survey issues. So I wanted to talk about that a little bit. There's some really valuable lessons here for land surveyors and civil engineers and project owners, program managers and project owners. It's been several years since this happened, and I'm not going to name the specific parties. But I think it's been long enough now that I can finally talk about what happened, because it's an important story, because there's a lot of valuable lessons. It's not a short story, so I'll probably break this into two videos. In this first video, I want to talk about the project and the players that were involved, and I want to describe what was my role in the project, and then I want to talk a little bit about how I found out that there was a problem. And then in the second part of the video, I'll talk about what caused the problem. What do I think caused the problem? And there was more than one root cause, so there were a few, at least a few. And then I want to talk about what does that teach us as land surveyors and civil engineers especially, but also as public agencies and program managers, project owners. So we'll start with just a description of the project and who the major players were. So the project was basically to move water through a new canal between two cities and an irrigation district. So it was a water sharing infrastructure project, which is not uncommon here in California. Water is a pretty precious commodity, and so this was a project to improve the ability of these three entities to be able to move water back and forth. The project was funded by what we call a joint powers authority. That was the two cities got together and formed a kind of a separate legal entity called the Joint Powers Authority to fund and build the project. So who were the players? We had the first city, we had the second city. The two cities, as the Joint Powers Authority, hired a large multidiscipline design firm to work as their program, what they call program managers. So to basically supervise all aspects of the project during design and construction. And then we had the irrigation district. Okay, so that's kind of on the design side. So you have the two cities, the irrigation district, and the program manager, large engineering company. And then on the construction side, you have three design build teams. So there was what I call the white team. They were building the first segment from the first city to the pump station, kind of in the middle. Then we had the second design team, Team Blue. They were building the second segment, the canal that went from the second city to the pump station in the middle. And then there was a third design build team, which we'll call Team Red, and they were responsible for building the actual pump station where the two canals kind of met in the middle. So those were the players. What was my role in the project? This was a huge project, huge multi-million-dollar project. I had a very small role. And I share that with you because it's going to become important later when we talk about the lessons. So my role in the project, we were asked, and I wasn't working at RH at the time. This was when I worked for a previous employer. My previous employer was asked by the program manager, so this is the big engineering company, to work as a sub to just do a simple topo of the pump station site. And when I say simple topo, I mean we were there less than a full day. So that's what we were hired to do, and we were given survey control to use for the topo. So we were given basically a point file, so point coordinates and a description of the points. Now, when we took a look at that, we realized that what we'd actually been given were a bunch of property corner monuments, which is not typically what you would use for control on this kind of project. And so we had a discussion with the program manager, and we said, hey, we're a little bit concerned here. We're a little bit concerned that good control work hasn't been done. You guys, it doesn't sound like you guys have a good control network that spans the project area. And we told them we think that's really important because the irrigation district has its own survey control system, and the two cities each have their own, and then the areas of the county in between the incorporated cities, there's a different vertical datum there. And so we said, you know, if you're not careful, this is going to cause problems. Why don't we help you? And we actually gave them a scope. We said, hey, here's a scope to do a control survey across the project area, make sure everybody's on the same page when it comes to where stuff is at. And it wasn't a cheap task. I don't want to pretend that it was. It was somewhere between $30,000 and $50,000, I think, to do that control survey. So we were told by the program manager, the civil engineer at the program manager, that's not your job. Don't worry about it. All we need you to do is take these control points that we've given you and go do that pump station topo. And so that's what we did. So okay, no problem. Just trying to be a good consultant. We'll just go do the pump station topo. And I was actually there. I went out with my party chief. We were there, I don't know, 6 hours maybe. We shot in their control and we performed a very basic topo. You know, it was a dirt site. We located some trees and took some ground shots, and that was basically it. So I don't know what our total budget was for that. It wasn't very much. I don't remember. This was several years ago. It was less than $10,000, almost certainly. Okay, so how did I find out there was a problem? That's the third question, the third point I wanted to talk about in this first part, this part one video. So how did I find out there was a problem? Because there's some lessons in that too, I think, in how I discovered there was a problem with the survey. So this is years after I had done the original work. I was at a different company. I want to say it was 4 or 5 years after we had done the pump station topo. I get a call from a civil engineer at the program manager, not the civil engineer I did the work from, that I did the work for originally. That person was no longer with the company. So it's a new civil engineer that has taken over the program management for the Joint Powers Authority, the two cities. And I get a call from this gentleman, very nice gentleman. And I felt bad for him because he got handed a mess. But he basically called me and said, hey, we have 2 major problems with this pump station topo that you guys did. He said the first problem is when they were in construction on the 2 canal segments. He said, hey, we got these canals coming together at the pump station and they're not lining up vertically. So there's a vertical bust. Neither canal segment matched each other. The elevations didn't match, and neither of the canal matched the pump station. So it was a mess. So that was the first problem. The second problem was there was a belief, depending on which elevations you used, that there was some critical infrastructure at the pump station itself that was going to be below the base flood elevation, which was going to cause some major problems. They weren't going to be able to get the kind of insurance they wanted for the pump station structure because of that. And this is like 100% design, 100% plans are done. People are going to construction. Like they're in construction when they figured this out. So why did he call me? Well, they had done some initial kind of poking around. You got to remember, it'd been years since I was involved. This guy is, again, a nice guy. He had done some poking around and found out that we did the pump station topo. And I don't know exactly what was said, but the finger got pointed at me. And they said, hey, Landon's got some kind of bust in his control. The elevations on the pump station topo are off 3 feet, something around there. And so he called me and he said, hey, I need to know if you mess this up, and I need your help to figure that out. So I told him, no problem. I said, it's been a while since I worked on this project. Let me call my former employer and see if I can get a hold of the records. And my former employer allowed me to do that. So I got the project files, and I started asking some questions. And one of the things that the civil engineer told me that puzzled me a little bit was he said, you gave us a control sheet with these elevation values and a datum statement. And so, the surveyors aren't working for the 2 design build teams believe that those elevations are in error. And I said, okay, no problem. I said, I don't remember providing you guys with a control sheet. I said, could you send me a copy of the control sheet? Because you got to remember, he didn't know what happened and I didn't remember. I didn't remember that we had been given the control. So he said, no problem. He sent me over the control sheet. So I took a look at the control sheet, and I started turning over some rocks. You know, I was calling some people that had worked with me on the project and trying to ask questions and remember what happened, going through the files. And so here, what did I find out? I was turning over some rocks. What was I able to find out? So here's what I found out. There were 5 different surveyors working on this project. So they hired a surveyor before they hired us, the JPA, to do some route planning. That's the surveyor that put the initial coordinate values on those property corners that we were handed as control for the pump station topo. And I don't think that surveyor ever intended for that to be the use, but that's where those coordinates came from. Then I did the pump station topo. And then they had 3 different design build surveyors, right? So they had the surveyor for the white team, the surveyor for the blue team, and the surveyor for the red team. So 5 different surveyors. The design build team for the first segment, the white team, used the vertical datum for the first city's control. So they used the first city's vertical datum. The design build team for this second city, the blue team, used the vertical datum for the second city. They were not the same vertical datum. The 2 vertical datums didn't line up. And then the third design build team used the same control that I was given for the pump station. So we have at least 3 vertical datums. Now, to make things even more complicated, in part of the design process, a decision was made at some point to use a legacy LiDAR data model to do some flood modeling. And nobody even knew who provided that LiDAR. They knew where the LiDAR data came from, but they didn't know how it was collected or who did the collection. They had no clue what vertical datum it was on. So somebody just grabbed some LiDAR data and did some flood modeling. So now we've got some unknown vertical datum for a total of 4 vertical datums on this project. So you have 5 surveyors, 4 vertical datums. I get to looking at the control sheet I was provided, and I realized that the civil engineer that was working for the program manager at the time I did the topo had prepared a survey control sheet for the plans, showed the control coordinates I was given for the pump station topo, put an incorrect datum statement on it, and signed and sealed the control sheet. So, I got a hold of the new civil engineer at the program manager, and I told him, I said, hey, look, here's the deal. Number 1, I said, we warned you guys about the need for a control system that spanned the project area. I know this wasn't you personally, but your predecessor decided not to heed that warning. So that's number 1. Number 2, you guys, the program manager, provided the survey control for the pump station topo. And I had documentation to prove that, because we didn't understand that when we started. I didn't remember, and he didn't know. I said, 3rd, I never put together a control sheet. I'd never seen that control sheet until you sent it to me. And by the way, my signature and seal isn't on that control sheet. It's the civil engineer that worked for you guys, and they have an incorrect datum statement on the control sheet. And 4, I said, hey, I did some poking around. I actually went in the field and I tied some benchmarks and did some more surveying. I said, you've got 3 different vertical datums out here at least, not counting whatever vertical datum the LiDAR data was done on. Now, I wasn't paid for any of that effort. So I did that, there was an accusation. It was polite, but there was an accusation made, a polite accusation, and I had to defend myself. And so I went out and did a day or 2 of survey work and a couple more days in the office to put together this information. Now, I don't know how this problem ultimately got fixed, because after I made my case to the civil engineer at the program manager, I never heard from these people again. And I haven't since. It's been years. So they never called me back. I don't think there was a lawsuit. I think they were able to get this resolved, probably with some design changes. And once I had proven that this was not my fault, people stopped calling me. Now, I want to talk in part 2 about what the root causes were, and I want to talk a little bit about the lessons. But I will tell you, one of the conversations I had with the program manager was, you've got a multi-million-dollar infrastructure project here. I think it's pretty ridiculous that you guys are trying to pin the major problems you're having on the guy that did a 6-hour dirt topo. in the middle of the project. I told him, I said, I think that's a little bit of a stretch. And I'm pretty sure that's the argument my professional liability company is going to make to you if you try and make a claim against me. And obviously it was I made a good defense because the people, they stopped calling and they found some other way to get this problem fixed. So I want to talk about in part 2, what do I think caused this and what do we learn from it? Because the point of the video isn't to be a smash piece or to take a hit out on anybody. It's to teach the lessons here, right? There's lessons for lots of different folks.